This evening's PowerPoint presentation will be discussing working with students displaying defiant behaviors. The topics covered during this presentation are as follows. What does it mean to be defiant? Then, what is ADHD? Characteristics of a child who has ADHD, working with a child who has ADHD, how it relates to a comprehensive school counseling program, followed by my references. So, what does it mean to be defiant? According to the dictionary, when the word defiance was looked up, there were multiple words which stuck out to me. Some of the words which were mentioned were oppositional, refusing to obey, and a willingness to resist. Further research when looking at the term defiant disorder then reference to the following disorders: oppositional defiant disorder, ADHD, conduct disorder, anxiety disorder, depressive disorder, and substance abuse. While working with defiant behaviors is a difficult task, and oftentimes, if one is not familiar with firsthand knowledge about a student and whether or not they have a diagnosis, then it can be guarded as a child being disrespectful or the child having difficulties with following simple tasks or instructions. Where the term defiance has such a grand amount of information depending on the diagnosis chosen, I specifically will be focusing on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or what is known as ADHD. Before one can understand what it is like to work with a student who displays defiant behaviors such as ADHD, it is important to understand what exactly is this diagnosis. What is ADHD? ADHD is defined as a heritable neurodevelopment disorder with childhood onset. That means that it's normally caught or a child is diagnosed very early on in their youth. It is also characterized by persistence of hyperactivity, impulsivity, and attention deficit. ADHD used to be known as attention deficit disorder or ADD. However, in 1994, it was renamed ADHD and broken down into three subtypes, each with its own patterns of behavior. ADHD is furthermore a behavioral condition which makes it difficult for a child to stay on task, focusing on everyday routines or requests. This presents as a challenge as there are differences in parts of their brain that control their activities, which speaks to why they have difficulty staying on task and following through. So, we're going to be discussing the characteristics of a child who has ADHD, and they are grouped into three categories as follows: inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. So, the first one is inattention. A child who's diagnosed with ADHD appears to have the following behaviors as it relates to inattention. They're easily distracted, they have difficulties following directions or completing given tasks, they daydream, and they do not appear to be listening. So, oftentimes, when you're dealing with a child that has ADHD, when you're talking to them, you'll notice that they're spacing off, or they fail to give you eye contact, or they'll be looking around even though you're talking to them, but it appears to you that they're not listening. Hyperactivity. When a child with ADHD presents with hyperactivity, they tend to fidget or squirm, and this is observed specifically while they're sitting. They don't like to stay seated, they talk excessively, and they're on the go as though driven by a motor. Last, impulsivity. A child who has ADHD shows the following as it relates to impulsivity. Oftentimes, they're interrupting others. So, for example, this can look like they're outside during recess with a group of their peers, and they could be doing one activity and then just abruptly interrupt the other peers who may or may not have acts that they um, incorporate in their game. They're calling out answers, and that's even if the teacher or the counselor hasn't selected them to speak. They have difficulties with waiting on their turns, and they just act immediately. So they're not thinking before they react, they're just doing without thinking. Now, with regards to this diagnosis, I wanted to look further with regards to who's most affected. Is it boys or girls? And based on the information I received during my research, I learned that according to the information obtained, boys were well outrepresented as they were diagnosed with ADHD in a ratio of 9 to 1, as opposed to girls, which the ratio was represented by 2 to 1. So, attention deficit hyperactive disorder is identified as one of the most common behavioral disorders of childhood. This is information which was obtained from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Significantly, ADHD affects 3 to 5% of children every year. And again, boys, approximately 3 times more than girls, are diagnosed with this disorder. It is to the extent to which ADHD adversely affects the overall function of children and adolescents and cannot be underestimated. It is well documented that the attention and associated behavior problems that children with ADHD experience negatively affect academic performance and their school functioning. So, how does a school counselor work with a child who has a defiant behavior such as ADHD? Well, please understand that a school setting can be a difficult place for children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The core symptoms of ADHD again includes inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity, which makes meeting the curriculum demands of the classroom for children with this diagnosis challenging. ADHD negatively impacts not only academic performance, but also social and emotional functioning as well. Given the negative consequences of ADHD, effective school-based interventions are warranted. So the role of a school counselor is uniquely positioned as they are to implement strategies for working with children with ADHD to maximize their capacity for learning. Additionally, school personnel should be knowledgeable regarding the various associated issues that children with ADHD may face. School counselors can also coordinate several other strategies with classroom teachers to help students with ADHD succeed academically. So that means fostering a working relationship with the teachers to help them come up with different strategies that may or may not work to help students succeed academically with this diagnosis. Effective school-based interventions begin with structured classroom management that typically employs consequences for behavior. So, that means that it is good to incorporate both positive and negative consequences in the classroom for children with ADHD. Now, when considering these plans for reinforcement and punishment, teachers and school counselors should note that consequences need to be more powerful for children with ADHD. They need to be delivered more frequently and they need to be immediate. Particularly important is that the rewards need to be changed regularly so that they do not lose their reinforcing power. So that means that if a child is accustomed to getting maybe 3 stickers for behaving 3 consecutive days, 1 week, or maybe for the first 2 weeks, then maybe something that could be done is you're giving them 3 stickers um, every other day for continuing on a pattern of good behavior. And if they are not meeting the goals, then maybe you'll subtract the stickers. So instead of them getting 9 stickers 1 week because they may have done something bad, maybe they get 8 or 7. Moreover, for any behavior management plan to work, involving students in the creation of the menu of possible rewards is critical. It gives them a sense of empowerment. It also includes them or makes them feel included with regards to what it takes for them to earn their rewards. It gives them a sense of independence and it holds them accountable for their behavior. The reason is that different rewards will be reinforcing for different students, and what adults may believe to be rewarding for students may be different from what a particular student finds reinforcing. Also, effective reinforcers may vary from student to student, and school counselors may assist teachers by brainstorming school-based rewards that the teacher can use with students with ADHD. Although both positive and negative consequences are important in modifying behavior in children with ADHD, positive reinforcements in the form of positive and powerful rewards should initially be provided in order to reinforce the desired behavior.
They need to work not only with the counselor, but their families and other educators in order to achieve their goals. How can this be effective without a competent and fair school counselor? Well, the school counselor provides services to students, their families, and other school administration. This can only be successful with their being knowledgeable, by their being aware and capable of trainings, updates, and professional development courses. One way which a counselor is important is by fostering a working relationship with the students, teachers, and they're devising a plan with regards to individually how does one reach the student.
Please understand that no one student is the same. So, it is important for the counselor and teacher to devise strategies and provide support to ensure that the student is capable of reaching their goals. It takes a variety of interventions, and it also takes a willingness of all involved that includes the school, the counselor, the family, any other outside entities that are working with the child to ensure that the child is not left behind. It is already a disadvantage that they're faced with a multitude of rejection and categorized as being annoying at times, having difficulties with being still or staying on track. So, developing a collaborative plan to support the student will ensure that they are meeting their educational and social emotional goals. Please refer to the references as this is where I've received my information from to complete this assignment. And I hope that you have gained some insight with regards to what was presented. Thank you, class, and enjoy the rest of your evening.